You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Haristodoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristodoulou, and today I'm continuing on with my draft preview series for the NFL, diving into the Seattle Seahawks and going over a couple of guys I would like to see them take in this year's NFL draft. So, my Seattle Seahawks fans, comment down below. Let me know, who do you have your eye on in this draft that you want to see your team grab? Let me know your thoughts, your opinions on my selections. Maybe I went right or wrong in a direction with one of the two guys I have listed out here to talk about with you today. Fire away. Love to hear the discussion from you all. But diving right in, I'm going to start with a pick that could happen a little bit later in the draft for the Seahawks, and then I'm going to cover what I would like to see the Seahawks do with that number 5 selection they have in round number 1. So, with this first selection that I'm talking here, I really like this pick because I think it's something that you can do in Seattle, and when I look at every other current situation, this pick makes the most sense for Seattle, in my opinion. But also, I feel as it's the only team that could make this pick work and work really, really well for them down the road. And I'm talking in round number 2 at pick number 37. Should he be available? Because I've seen some things that say maybe he doesn't actually escape the first round, or if he does, he's going within the top few picks of the second round, which the Seahawks are obviously picking in. I would like to see the Seahawks go and grab from Tennessee quarterback Hendon Hooker. The reason for this, the main reason for this, as I already kind of mentioned, is because I firmly believe that the situation in Seattle is absolutely perfect for Hendon Hooker. If there is one person in the NFL right now as a head coach that I would trust a prospect like Hendon Hooker to, it's going to be Pete Carroll, who, after what you just saw he did with Geno Smith as his quarterback last season, he's the guy that could take someone like Hendon Hooker, who I understand, a little bit of an older prospect, probably not necessarily the name you want to hear me fire off when I say quarterback of your potential future, but Pete Carroll is the guy who could take Hendon Hooker and absolutely maximize him to his fullest potential. I like what they're building over there in Seattle. They had an excellent draft class last year, hitting on some really good pieces on both the defense and the offensive side. You're only a handful of pieces away in Seattle at this point now, based off of how last year went, and with Geno Smith being your quarterback for at least the next few years, from legitimately contending. Now, can Geno Smith repeat the year he had last year? For the Seahawks' sake, I hope so, but I also don't necessarily think he's going to be the long-term answer. And when you look at the contract that Geno Smith got, a lot of it is pretty much hell-bent on him succeeding all 3 years for him to stick around and earn that entire $105 million that the contract is worth. Hendon Hooker is very accurate. He's athletic enough to force defenses to respect his legs and mobility. But again, you couple that with accuracy, good decision-making, very smart guy. I know that there's concerns about the offense that he ran in Tennessee. However, you have to look at it this way. Unorthodox offense, at least for what you see in the NFL, and he was still bringing it to some of the best defenses that you see in the NCAA through the SEC. He had success against Alabama. Sure, they struggled a bit going up against Georgia, but who didn't really struggle against Georgia's defense this year, aside from maybe a team or two? But overall, I just think that this pick allows you to take Hendon Hooker, sit him for a year, and so yeah, maybe you don't even see him start and take legitimate reps until he's 26 years old. But the way quarterbacks are going in this day and age in the NFL, and the way the NFL has evolved their rules, Hendon Hooker could realistically play until he's 36, 37, 38, if all goes well for him. And what's that? You're looking at 12, 13 years of him. Could you be really mad if you took a guy in the second round and he wound up playing 11, 12, 13 years of football for you? I don't think you could be mad about that. And I firmly believe with the coaching staff you have over there in Seattle, with some of the absolute steals you nabbed in this past year's draft in 2022 and where this team seems to be heading trajectory-wise, he would be perfect to sit behind Geno Smith, a guy who has been through a ton of adversity himself, as Hendon Hooker is kind of dealing with right now, coming back from his ACL injury. This is one of those things that when I look at it, makes a little too much sense to me. Maybe I'm completely wrong on this. By all means, let me know if you think so. But I firmly believe by taking Hendon Hooker in round number 2, it allows you to go after 2 legitimate pieces you feel you need to really help elevate your team in rounds 1 with your first 2 selections there. Go after whatever it is you want with that. And fingers crossed, if Hendon Hooker's there at 37, just snag him. I think he's smart enough and accurate enough and mobile enough. He's got the arm strength for it as well to make it in the NFL. And coupled with the fact that a lot of scouts seem to believe he needs maybe a year to sit and get acclimated to really see what he can do, you get that opportunity with Geno Smith as QB1 this year, and things could look very bright for the foreseeable future beyond Geno Smith as your quarterback. I love what Geno Smith has done in Seattle. I'm not going to sit here and act like his career is going to fold next year and that this past year was just an absolute complete stroke of luck and that was it. You don't know. But for the long-term future, I like Hendon Hooker in Seattle. Now, switching over and talking about that, like I mentioned, we're keeping our options now wide open because you don't have to commit to a quarterback in round number 1 because we're aiming to nab our guy in round number 2. What would I like to see the Seattle Seahawks do with that? Pick number 5. This is one of those rare instances that do not very often happen in the NFL. You have a team that was in the playoffs picking in the top 5. This is not something that you can really make up in your wildest dreams. But here we are, Seattle, at number 5, talking about who to select here to help either your offense or your defense out. And for me personally, one thing that I would really like Seattle to do is fortify that defense with a premier guy, a guy that you look at and you go, this guy is more than likely going to start day 1 and be an impact playmaker day 1. And the way those first 4 picks in the draft can kind of shake out, I think there's a possibility that Alabama's Will Anderson is going to be available for you. And if he's there, go and get him. You get a guy like Will Anderson, who, again, the way I look at him is a legit blue chip prospect, a guy that you're going to start day 1 and is going to make an impact day 1. I've seen some people comparing him to a slightly slower Von Miller. The guy's a super freak athlete, a legitimate 3-down edge rusher that you can have going every single play that you need to in those passing downs. He had 34.5 sacks, 204 total tackles, and 58.5 tackles for loss in his time at Alabama. And for all the pass rushing praise that this guy gets, he is a legit run defender on top of that. He's not a one-trick pony. He's a guy that can do it all for you and be effective, whether he's setting the edge for run plays or he's trying to push that pocket in and get after the quarterback. He can do it all. He's praised as a student of the game. If he's there at number 5, I think you'd be doing your defense a disservice in not taking a guy like Will Anderson. Obviously, there's not going to be some cons with him, and when you look at the list, it's pretty short. Polishing up some technique stuff, which I think you have some really good coaches over there in Seattle who could really maximize the potential of him. And things like his form, playing too upright, like it's like nitpicky type things when you look at his cons list. There's obviously no prospect is a perfect prospect, but when you look at Will Anderson's, the list is like this big compared to the list that is like this big of things that he can do correctly and do really, really well. You have him opposite of Uchenna Nwosu, and you start just kind of salivating at the idea of what you can get there. And yeah, you could maybe even go interior on the D-line here, but remember, you have another pick in the first round you could use. If you wanted to really double down and fix up that defensive front to help out that really good young secondary that blossomed last year for you, imagine what they could do having to cover for maybe a second or two less, knowing that that pocket is collapsing as they breathe down on the quarterback's necks that they're facing. I want to see Will Anderson in Seattle. Like I said, I'm taking Hendon Hooker for you in the second round to really open up your possibilities for what you can do in the first round and helping out the rest of your team. I think that Pete Carroll is the head coach and guy who could groom Hendon Hooker into the quarterback he could be in the NFL and completely maximize his potential. I believe in what Pete Carroll's doing in that offensive system over there. It's very clear that it works. I don't really think I don't think Russell Wilson may be as bad as we saw him last year. I think there's a lot more there was a lot more going on, I should say, with the offense over there in Denver this past season. I think it was more than just Russell Wilson, but I don't really think it's a coincidence that Geno Smith steps in, has himself a career year coming into Pete Carroll's system after Pete Carroll also drafted Russell Wilson in the third round, and Russell Wilson turned out to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback and is playing as good as he did in the Pete Carroll offensive system that they had going on over there. I believe in that offense. You go get Hendon Hooker. You go defense in the first round to really shore up the group over there, especially like the D-line is what I'm really looking at. Go after your guys. Get Will Anderson if he's there. Hell, fight for that number 3 spot if you really need to, because right now it looks like 1, 2, and 4 are going quarterbacks. And if you think you need to trade up to get him, you have 2 first-round picks. You have a few other picks you could package together and move up a couple of spots. It's not like the number 5 pick isn't attractive. You could offer that if, say the Cardinals are willing to let Will Anderson go, because who knows? The Cardinals seem to be doing a lot of head-scratching things the last few years. They need a lot, and they could use some more picks if they're willing to take whatever package you want to put together. But I do think there's a strong possibility Will Anderson sitting there at number 5 for you, and you got to go after and take him. But that's what I would like to see from these Seattle Seahawks in this year's draft. Again, my Seahawks fans, let me know. What do you think in the comment section down below? How are you feeling about the Seahawks in this draft class coming up? What do you want to see them do? How do you feel about the 2 selections I just rattled off here? All that, I want to hear your thoughts and opinions. But that is it for me. I appreciate you for watching. I will see you next time. Have a good one.